I'm the co-host, so I just started it, but I guess we're not quite ready. So for anyone who's on, we are slowly joining.
Thank you, Colleen. This is one of the first times that we have had a community meeting set up as Zoom. We usually do it in a webinar setting. So we're all going to have to I'm going to have to get accustomed to and adjusted to this.
So I don't see
My comment that I would like to make right off the bat is that if you could please mute yourself at this point while we're waiting for the others to join. That would be best. Thank you.
I can't get it any louder.
Hello, Raphael.
Mary, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks very much for joining us.
It's wonderful seeing you. Thank you for the invitation.
And the recording. Oh my God.
Absolutely. So my suggestion is that everyone should mute themselves, or if you're at all like I am, you'll find yourself saying something absolutely shocking out of your mouth when you don't hit the right button. So best that we mute ourselves at this point. Nice to see friends here this evening. It's going to be a good presentation. Come back. We'll give it a few more minutes and start right at 5:30.
Oh, good news. It looks like when I bought my car, I bought.
Just I'll remind everyone, if you, as you join, please mute yourselves before you say something that you might be embarrassed about.
Yeah.
Great. I see most people are muting themselves. That's great.
Debbie, your mic is unmuted.
I'll give it just another minute and then we'll go ahead and start the meeting.
Supervisor Adams, I'm working to see if the presenter is able to share their screen. So we're doing just one thing on the background.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reichmuth, hello, hello. I love my Audi A5 every day and thank you as I drive it.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm so glad to hear it. Can you hear me okay?
Mute
Yes.
your mic, please.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, everyone's muting. That's great. And Colleen, can you tell whether the presenters have the opportunity to share their screen?
Not yet, but I think I will just make them a co-host so we can get going.
Okay, well, Steve Jobs tells me that it is 5:30. So it is time for us to start our community meeting. And I'm very delighted that we're able to do this evening. I am happy to be co-hosting this from the Board of Supervisors office, myself and my policy analyst, Colleen Courtney. And we are hosting with Randy Ishii from the Monterey County Director of Monterey County Public Works, Facilities and Parks, and also the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee is part of our group this evening. And many of you may not know who's on the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee. So I'm going to ask all of the members of the committee if you could unmute yourself. And I'm going to go through and call your name when I see you. And if I miss anyone, I'll ask you to please come to please say hello. So I see Tom Gano on our committee. And who else do I see here? I know I saw a few more people from the committee. Okay, we have on staff, we have Chad Lineo, as well as, of course, our Randy Ishii. So that's all that I'm seeing from the Carmel Valley Road Committee. Is there someone else on the call that I may have missed? Who's on the Carmel? I see Michael Waxer and Fred Rubin. And there may be others that I have missed. I'm not seeing everyone, everyone's name here. But at any rate, I welcome you all to this meeting this evening. And I thank you for joining us. This meeting was scheduled to be held in person, as you know, at the Tularcitos Elementary School. But we got a couple of folks who were interested in participating, but just did not feel as if they were in a position to be able to attend a meeting in person. So we decided it was worthwhile just to go ahead and do the meeting by Zoom. So we have readjusted ourselves to be able to host this virtually, and I hope that everyone has a good experience. A few Zoom reminders. As I said, this is a Zoom meeting and not a webinar. So all of the participants of this meeting will have the opportunity to be visible and to be heard. So I ask everyone, please mute yourself when you're not speaking to ensure the presentation can be heard easily and without disruption. If you would prefer to not be seen, just please ensure that your video is turned off as well. The meeting format allows everyone to participate a bit more easily in comparison to the webinar format. If you join this meeting using your computer, the Raise My Hand button can be found under the Reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. And if you join this meeting using your telephone, you can press *9 on your telephone to raise your hand to make a comment, and then you can press *6 to unmute yourself. I am pleased more than ever to be able to introduce someone with whom I just have a terrific working relationship and a very positive, well, very high opinion of, and that is Mr. Randy Ishii, who is the director, as I mentioned earlier, of the Public Works, Facilities and Parks Division. And I'm going to turn it over to Randy with a great deal of thanks for all of the work that we're doing. Randy's going to take over as leading the meeting, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing more details from the consultants about the proposed projects. The consultant. So thank you all for your patience. And let's see, good job. Absolutely, Colleen, great job. So I think we're ready to turn it back over to Randy, who had introduced our consultants.
Yes, Supervisor Adamson, thank you for addressing that highly inappropriate behavior. Jay, would you like to try sharing your screen again and going through your presentation, starting off with the why roundabouts slide?
Okay. And again, let me know if you can see that.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
very good. All right, so the first slide was about traffic circles, which we've seen before, but a modern roundabout is different in that key elements of it, we use specific design criteria, and it's designed to control speed to and through the intersection. It's also designed to be multimodal. That is, you can have bicyclists, pedestrians, you could have transit buses and other vehicles go through that roundabout fairly easily. And it's definitely more efficient for traffic flow. And again, a key element of this is the controlling the speed at the entry, circulating, and exit points. As you can see, this is it's a deflection to the side, which slows vehicles. They yield to traffic in the circle, and then they enter. So this is a picture of a traffic circle that probably many of you have seen and driven on recently, the one over at the Holman Highway, Highway 68, right there in Monterey. GHD designed that roundabout. And essentially you can see that the markings and the direction that vehicles are supposed to go is easily understood. And this is one that has had a really, really good reaction from the community, as well as from a performance standpoint. And it seems that after initial skepticism, that residents and folks that need to get through this intersection are finding it meets their expectations, and they're happy about it. And it has not created any adverse problems that some had thought it would. So the modern roundabout will accommodate, as I mentioned, persons with disabilities that need special crossing, regular folks that are just trying to get from one side of an intersection to another, cyclists who can go through the roundabout like a vehicle, emergency response vehicles, and large trucks. And that's part of what our design does, is it accommodates those large vehicles to be able to make that circle and go in the direction that they want to go in. And we'll get into the design's elements a little bit later. One of the most important benefits of the roundabout is that it results in a reduction in serious collisions. And this is information that comes from the Federal Highway Administration and the Institute for Highway Safety. And it shows that at least a 75% reduction in injury and fatality collisions. And this is after converting from a standard intersection design with either no control or a signal to a roundabout. And you can see that pedestrian collisions go down, overall collisions go down as well. So that's one of the very most important elements of modern roundabouts. And how does it really do that? Well, we call it reducing conflict points. So a standard intersection, a four-legged intersection, as you can see on the right, the vehicles that enter that intersection have as many as 32 conflict points with other vehicles and pedestrians. And pedestrians have at least 16 conflict points with vehicles as they try to cross the street. The roundabout is different. By separating the pedestrians from the vehicles, you reduce the conflict points for both pedestrians and vehicles together. So that's one of the primary reasons that the roundabouts have shown improved safety from a collision standpoint. From a bicycle standpoint, this is a two-lane roundabout that looks like a bicyclist may want to traverse through. You can traverse the roundabout as the green line follows through as a vehicle would through the traveled lane. Or if you're not so confident, you can move off to the side. You can take the pedestrian pathways through the roundabout intersection and then on your way and then back into the bike lane. So we allow for a couple different ways for bicyclists to be able to navigate the intersection, because traditional intersections, large intersections with signals, are oftentimes very challenging for cyclists to be able to navigate safely. This quick video shows a double trailer hay truck circulating through a roundabout. You can see it at a very slow speed. You can see other vehicles following and leading behind it, and it is able to navigate that center island fairly easily to get to the direction that it wants to go. And you can see how folks are waiting at the entry points for a gap to move into traffic and then circulate in the roundabout themselves. So again, an opportunity for large trucks where it might not seem that easy, but the design helps it become much more navigable. Same thing goes with emergency vehicles. There's a concern of response time delays and other kinds of things like that. But the roundabout, center island, and roadway areas are designed to accommodate these larger vehicles as they circulate through. And again, we've had in the city of San Luis Obispo, the fire department and the police department have both signed on very well to the concept of roundabouts and the fact that it does not delay their response times to any significant degree. Oops. So the other thing the modern roundabout does, it increases the capacity and it reduces the delay at the intersection. Well, how does it do that? So we look at this left side with a traffic signal, and then we see the roundabout symbol here. We oftentimes will find vehicles as they come to a traffic signal, they're waiting many seconds in delay. Sometimes that's waiting because the light's not green. Sometimes that's waiting to make a turn. With a roundabout, generally speaking, you can move quickly through that roundabout with much less delay. Even when you double the amount of traffic, you end up with the same concept. More delay through a signalized intersection and less delay when you use a roundabout. So in this age of greenhouse gas emissions and climate, trying to do sustainability things, we see vehicles with less time idling, which means fewer emissions and less fuel consumption. And with gas prices where they are today, that's probably a bonus. So we've been, as Randy mentioned, we've been working on the project with the county since early 2019. We have had numerous conversations with Randy, with the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee, with also via email and phone calls with folks as they've had questions and concerns, and we've moved the project forward. So it is something that we are continuing to communicate with stakeholders as we advance the project through its development phases. So a little history, again, back in 2018, there was a corridor study that indicated a roundabout as a preferred control strategy for this intersection. And then Randy hired GHD to come on board and begin the process. As I mentioned, we have had two previous Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee virtual meetings in 2020. And then in March of 2022, there was another meeting, which was to talk about the environmental document and the work that was done by Rincon Consultants. And in March of 2022, the environmental approval was granted for the roundabout concept at this intersection. So that's an important timeline as we have been moving this forward. We have been making progress, and as I hope, trying to keep the community informed as well. So what's next? Concept approval for certain that we're moving into the design phase, right-of-way acquisition, which for this project is really going to be the temporary construction easements for the construction project to be able to be built. We expect about 18 months to complete our design, and then we'd be ready to go out to bid. So we've had some time to understand the intersection characteristics, and we do know that from several directions, there is limited intersection sight distance. And so a driver that's stopped waiting here oftentimes has to inch out further before they are sure that they can go and turn left and go onto Carmel Valley Road, or even turn right. We know that there's bus stops, transit activity, and so pedestrians in this vicinity. So that will be accounted for in our design. And we know that there is a serious steep grade that descends down to the intersection that coming off of Laureles Grade Road. And I'll have more to say about that in a little bit, as we've had some additional direction from the county in terms of what we want to share with you tonight. So safety at the intersection is obviously a concern. And as you can see, there have been a concentration of collisions at the intersection and nearby. And so the roundabout is, as I mentioned before, we think the preferred intersection control to help reduce those collisions and the severity of those collisions. We also know that this intersection with Laureles Grade Road that runs over the top of the hill to Highway 68 and Carmel Valley Road, which proceeds on to the west and on to the east, back down into the valley further, is a very, very important connection for regional and local access needs. So the vehicles that have to get back and forth through here, we need to make this intersection as efficient as possible and as safe as possible for all of those users. So what we've been working on with the county over the course of the last about year and a half has been trying to figure out how we will design the roundabout. And this is a layout that I'm showing you here. And the key element of this layout and its placement is this center island. So we looked at several different options, which I shared at the previous meetings. One of them was what we call a northwest center island shift, which meant it was over this direction. And the other one was a southerly shift of the center island. And we looked at with a matrix, and we spent some time with county staff looking at this matrix, kind of judging some various things that we would say would be a positive or a negative based on the position of that center island. We determined that balancing right-of-way impacts, trying to reduce the environmental impacts of these alternatives, making sure that we're taking into consideration multimodal use, and then also the stage construction of the project in order to try to reduce and minimize as much possible the disruption that will occur once it's built. We settled in on this northeast center island as preferred choice. And that shows this center island which essentially shifts slightly north and east into an area which is already county property. And we avoid further impacts down into the creek area here, and we avoid a large take of private property over on this one side. So this is the one that the environmental review was based on, and the concept was approved by county staff as a preferred alternative for that purpose. So we know based on the history here that there's many project issues. Cost efficiencies, we know the county is really needs to be aware of how much this project will ultimately cost. We know that there's many special events throughout the valley, throughout the year that rely on this intersection in a very critical way. We know that residents, business owners, and tourists, we want to minimize that disruption during construction. We know there's an element of potential emergency evacuation for these routes. And one only has to be aware of forest fires that have been occurring around the state to know that critical and efficient emergency evacuation is important. And then we know this downhill grade to the intersection, we need to try to figure out some way that we can help deal with that. So a question was asked about roundabouts that GHD has designed that were constructed that had steep grades on the approach or departure from those roundabouts. This is one that was completed fairly recently in Truckee, California, and it's a single lane roundabout like we would be proposing for Laureles Grade and Carmel Valley Road. It does accommodate a California legal design vehicle. That means those large trucks we saw in the video can circulate through here, and it has a steep approach on the grade as the project has been built. Now, you can see on this diagram that I'm kind of pointing out here, this is elevation on the left side, going from smaller to larger. And this is length and distance, which is if you took a line and you just drew through the middle of the roundabout from one end to the other, you can see that this has a very pronounced grade, 8.5%, which is very similar to the grade of Laureles Grade coming down into the intersection. So this roundabout was designed and constructed by GHD. We spent considerable amount of time on the design in the middle of this center island and the roadways as they approach to make sure that we didn't have a cross section or a slope that could cause a large vehicle to, when it's turning, to get off center and potentially tip over. And we call it a hand grading solution for roundabout control in this particular issue. And it's something that we've gotten very good at. The project took about 5 months to construct. And so not a large amount of time, but similar in some degrees to what we're trying to do here. Here's another one that's in Colfax, California, which is on near I-80 going up towards Tahoe. The same thing, a single lane roundabout that takes a STAA design vehicle, which is the largest truck that can use truck routes in California. Again, steep approaches on this roundabout. And again, hand grading to get the fine level of design details done for this center island and the passageways to ensure as best possible that these vehicles will have a comfort going through the roundabout and then out into the exit ways. About 6 months worth of construction. And again, this diagram shows that very steep slope on the approach through into the middle of that roundabout. So controlling speed is important. As you can see, these have the necessary deflection to help do that. So one of the things about emergency evacuation is there's been a few studies across the country about the use of roundabouts when it comes time to have to evacuate folks from areas because of storms and other kinds of things that they need to be leaving an area from. And the conclusion has been that these roundabouts aid in evacuation attempts. And one of the things here I'll bring up is, as this example of Clearwater Beach, where traffic would flow into the roundabout from a couple different directions and in and out of that roundabout. And the goal is to get them, across the causeway back to the mainland. You can see that this flow can be blended in the same direction away from Clearwater, which needs to be evacuated. And the roundabout helps separate and segregate that traffic, so it's not everybody trying to merge through the same conventional intersection at the same time. So we believe that in contraflow situations like this is, that the roundabout can help in terms of organizing those evacuation efforts. So let's get to the issue of the steep grade and what we need to think about for truck accommodations. So on Laureles Grade Road, the county has a number of locations where they have signs that warn truckers about grade and the need to use lower gears so that they don't get out of control with speed and have to rely on brakes to slow them down and stop them. In the general vicinity of the intersection with Laureles Grade, there's a location that's primarily back just before the last curve as you're coming down the hill to the intersection, where the grade is 8%. That's similar to those roundabouts that we were just looking at a couple of minutes ago, but we know that's a challenge. And so that we know as that 8% approaches this roundabout intersection, we're going to have to carefully design the center island, the circulation area, and the entry and exit points to make sure that we don't cause larger vehicles to tip or kind of get uncomfortable as they're trying to navigate it. But from a runaway truck standpoint, this is kind of the last run down the hill. And what we're thinking about, at least in the short term, we've come up and talked to the county about this, and we've identified a couple of options that we might want to consider for runaway truck accommodation. This is a location approximately where I was showing you on the previous slide, right after the curve coming down to the intersection. And what we want to potentially consider here is this area to the right, which could be modified and graded so that a truck might be able to take refuge here. It's a small area, but it is one which potentially would give a truck driver an opportunity to get off the roadway before he got down to the intersection. We don't know exactly how that would work just yet, but that's something that if the county wants us to study there, we believe we have the experience to be able to do that, and we may be able to come up with with a good option here. Signage is always important to let truckers and drivers know what they're coming up to next. So a second option, as we look at the way the roundabout is initially, as we have determined it to be placed, one location right close to the corner, this area is currently going to be set up as a stormwater detention basin. So it'll be slightly lower than the area next to the roadway. So it provides another opportunity, potentially an option 2 for a truck refuge here. It's not potentially ideal as it's so close to this intersection, but it could be something that gets considered. The third one is a little different, and I'll explain more about this in practical application in just a minute. But basically what this involves is utilizing metal beam guard railing that as you come down close to the intersection, the truck would edge up against the guard railing, which will begin to create the friction and cause the truck to slow before they get to that final point of crossing into the intersection. And then potentially we have some guardrail on the other side, which keeps them from getting into the creek. But I'll explain a little bit more about this process in just a minute. So those are 3 options we've been thinking about in conjunction with the county for this project. So I spent nearly 20 years with Caltrans, and I worked in the Central Valley for a long time. And this is a couple of pictures from Highway 166, which comes down out of the Cuyama Valley down towards Interstate 5, very south end of the valley. And it's a 2-lane highway. It has warning signs for the steep downgrades, trucks to use their low gears, a truck speed limit, which has been proven to be effective when enforced, and then a runaway truck ramp on this 2-lane highway. Interestingly, that's something which, the Department of Transportation decided it was important because they had runaway trucks coming down off this long grade. So at this location on 166, there is an actual runaway truck ramp that goes off to the side, the right side of the roadway. And as you can see it kind of runs down and then up into the kind of a hillside here. This whole area is full of river cobble, and it's round stones, so that when a truck runs off the edge, it drops into this gravel bed and immediately sinks below its axles. And the force against the gravel and the gravel pushing against the truck begins to slow it down and stop it. And essentially that truck comes to rest in the middle of this gravel bed. You can see how big this is. This is several hundred feet long, requires quite a bit of extra room to stop a large runaway truck. But it is something that the department has determined is important enough to have, and it's been used on a number of occasions. But one of the other things that also gets used on a lot of occasions is this seemingly inconspicuous piece of guardrail, which I took a picture of on Interstate 5 coming off the Grapevine down into the area south of Bakersfield. Those trucks coming down that grade, there's 3 different truck escape ramps that they can use. But oftentimes what you'll find is the trucks will come down and they will edge over to that right side and they will begin to scrape along that guard railing. And you can see why that guard railing is so messed up. It's not punctured through, but these truckers, they're running along the edge, which is creating that friction and slowing their trucks down. One of the things we learned early on with the runaway truck ramps is it's quite an extraction operation and very expensive to get them out of those gravel beds. And so trucks that don't go into those runaway truck ramps, they use the guardrail to a great degree to slow themselves down, to get to a speed where they can manage as they come to the bottom of the grade and then seek repairs for either the brakes or whatever it is that was going wrong with their truck on the way down the hill. So this, as I related in that previous example, near the bottom of the hill, is a possible option and a real life option for the way trucks would use it. So that to us is something that bears consideration if we're going to do some inclusion of that type of feature in the project. And then lastly, for the presentation, here we are today. We're still looking at the final concept approval, which we can then enter our 65% design and then complete our design. And at this point in time, what we're hoping with continuing community engagement and feedback on the project, that we would be looking at the end of August 2023 to be able to have a project that the county would be able to then take out to bid and potentially start that process to hire a contractor and begin construction. So with that, that's the presentation that I had, and certainly would be happy to entertain questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Jay, for the presentation. And thank you. I see we have one hand raised. And if you want to ask a question, please press *9 if you're on the phone, or hit the raise hand icon on your computer screen so that we can entertain everybody's questions. And I'll be taking them in order. The first question is from Noel.
Thank you for recognizing me. My name's Noel, and I'm speaking as a member of the Baranda Garzas Firewise neighborhood. And I really appreciate the excellent presentation and all the information you have to share with us. You touched on something that is related to my question. And my question pertains to the planning that's going on during the construction phase. And you had mentioned that you were looking at risks from wildfire threats. And I was curious if you have anything planned so that this intersection could be open during the construction phase in case emergency evacuations are necessary, because there are about 6,300 residents in the 93923 area code, and really the only two ways out of the valley in an emergency situation that a wildfire might bring are either up and down Carmel Valley Road or out over Laureles grade. So thank you if you could address that.
Sure, a very good question, and I did touch on that, the stage construction aspect of the project very briefly. It certainly is something that gets completely fleshed out during the design phase, because we need to know how we can build this project and at the same time keep accommodating the traffic on Laureles grade and the traffic on Carmel Valley Road. And so the work would be split up into stages where we would end up with continued access for all the movements through each of the stages. And what we might end up with is a time where we would have to do an overnight work in order to switch from one stage to the next, in order to avoid the disruption during the day of trying to close one direction or more. So I guess it's really an art that the designers and the county would work on. We believe and we know that that will be an extremely important element of the stage construction. So I believe we'll have the opportunity to more fully address that. And I think that's a request, of course, a perfectly reasonable request based on what could be happening or what's happening at any given time.
Thank you so much for the response.
Thank you, Noel. And next we have Melanie Beretti. I think, Melanie, that's you with the 199.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Melanie Beretti, calling as a Carmel Valley resident who does commute and drive over Laureles grade frequently. I just wanted to say thank you. I think it's a great project and I appreciate the thorough, thoughtful presentation. I just had a question. As you were going into the conversation about the discussion around runaway trucks, I think it just prompted me and I wanted to know, because it's not something I hear of regularly now, what is sort of the relative concern on the Laureles grade with runaway trucks, kind of in the current conditions, for how it's then being thought about and integrated into the project?
Well, so from a GHD perspective, in our discussions with county staff, the issue of a runaway truck on Laureles grade has come up. And of course, the idea is a truck starts down a steep grade and forgets potentially to put their truck in a lower gear to keep their engine brake helping them drive more slowly. And all of a sudden they find that they're having to use their brakes very, very much more than they should. And those brakes begin to fade or potentially fail as they're continuing down the grade. So once they lose that control, then there's the potential that they're going to run off the road somewhere, don't know exactly where based on when they're coming down the hill. But the concern that was raised was that those trucks may be down towards the end of the grade and coming close to the intersection where there is a whole bunch of cross traffic on Carmel Valley Road that would be potentially going back and forth across there when a runaway truck might enter that intersection. So that was the real concern. And so again, trying to look at ways that you can prevent that from happening at all is ideal. But then also, if there's a realistic aspect that you can provide some means for the trucks to help themselves slow down before they get to the intersection, then that's what we're going to be looking at with the county's direction during design.
Thank you. And I guess just for clarity, I guess my question is just actually now, are there a lot of runaway trucks that do come down the grade currently that there's a high expectation of runaway truck issues versus, I mean, it's important to consider, but I'm not familiar if there are a lot of runaway trucks that currently there are issues with coming down the grade.
And so that one is one which I'd have to ask Randy to respond to, Randy or Chad. That's not information that I've, it's been made available to me as we've been looking at this, but that's something which I think the county staff would be more appropriate to answer
Thank you, Jay. I'll take the question. And that's a very good question, Melanie. In a review of the recent collision history, we have not seen evidence of runaway trucks. Nevertheless, it is a possibility that has been brought to our attention. We want to make sure that gets fully vetted out. And we've incorporated that and thought that through in the course of our design, because during the design phase, we're able to take these things into consideration. And that's exactly what we're doing.
And
Good, thank you, that helps.
Thank you, Melanie. And just as a follow-up comment on that, I know that within the last 10 years, there were 2 runaway trucks, and sadly, both of them ended in fatalities. So I think people are very conscious of that and would not want any kind of a repeat. The next person that I have up is Lorraine Ring.
Hi, this is her husband, Richard Ring.
Hello.
And we live 1 block up the grade on Los Robles. I've lived there for 25 years. So my comments are a little bit general, and I think the presentation was very well done, okay, as to what a roundabout is all about. However, I would suggest somebody sit on that corner for a couple of months in a chair and monitor the type of traffic. It isn't the trucks. Sunday afternoon, there's hundreds of motorcycles. So I would like to hear how roundabouts work. And you cannot control people. There's 45-mile-an-hour speed limits up and down the grade. They do not drive up and down the grade 45 miles. I can tell you, you got a major problem trying to control traffic there with a roundabout. I'm sorry, nobody asked me, and this is the first I've ever heard, and I think you should include the community. I'd love to know what Bernardus thinks about this. They put a lot of money into that beautiful facility, so it looks to me like you're going to take over some of their land. End of comment. I just think the community you said has been involved. I've never heard of this. This is the first Zoom, and I appreciate the ability to talk. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very glad to have you here with us. Randy, is there any, or Jay, any comment on the motorcycles going through a roundabout?
I guess I would address it this way. The geometry of the roundabout, especially on the approaches, is designed to cause vehicles to slow as they come up close to that center island and that circulating roadway. And they then look for gaps in the vehicles that are already in that circulating roadway. And then they merge in and they enter, and then they go through the roundabout in kind of a normal way and exit wherever they're planning on going. The addition of motorcyclists with faster speeds, in my mind, a motorcycle is going to take a smaller gap than a car. It potentially is they're going to be able to get through that roundabout, but I do believe that it will slow them because it really is not a straightaway into any leg of the roundabout that they'll see with this design. So I don't know that we have a design accommodation for roundabouts, but we certainly know that they're part of the traveling public that will be using it. As it relates to the right-of-way from Bernardus, we actually are not taking any right-of-way from them. We would be needing a temporary construction easement just simply to build on the property that they had dedicated to the county sometime before.
I think one comment would be, I think you need to calculate or count the number of people who have died on the grade road. I think you'll find most of them are motorcycles, not big trucks. You're very focused on big trucks. There's signs on Carmel Valley Road that recommends you don't use the grade for large trucks. Most large trucks don't. They're worker trucks. I mean, even some PST kind of trucks, but they're not semis coming over the grade. So my only comment is, are you sure you understand the traffic pattern there?
Thank you again for your comment. Yep. Now I'll go to Bill Reichmuth. And Bill, if you could please unmute yourself. There we go.
Sorry, Mary, I managed to lose it. I'm not sure whose photo is being projected right now, but not mine. So I'm going to hit the lower hand button. Here we go. I just wanted to thank Jay for that wonderful presentation. The roundabout on Holman Highway at Highway 1, I think started when Jay was the director of Caltrans District 5, and I was the public works director in Monterey. That has performed magnificently. And so I'm just most pleased to hear that the county is contemplating the same kind of solution for Carmel Valley Road and the residents along that corridor specifically. So thanks again, Mary, for hosting, and don't be the least bit embarrassed about the events at the beginning of this meeting. Those kinds of things happen to everybody. I guess it's your turn. So, and I won't forget that you still owe me a ride in that A5. Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Tom Gano.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have only one short comment. It seems to me using guardrails to slow 18-wheelers is nothing but a fire hazard. And that's something we're very concerned about in the valley. That's my comment.
Thank you, Tom. Any comment back on that, Jay or Randy or Daniel?
I think there is a possibility that that could occur. And again, it would be something we'd have to carefully consider before applying it. But I used it as an example of a meaningful way that trucks are slowing when they have been out of control coming down a grade.
Yeah, well put, and thank you for the question, Tom. I will also point out that there is an option, instead of using wood posts, to use a steel post guard railing system. Caltrans, or the state DOT, has an approved version of that for fire country specifically. So we can definitely take that into consideration.
Great.
And if I may round this up before we go on to the next question, these are just options for everyone. These are just options. And that's why we're presenting to you, is to get that reception, that feedback, and know how we need to tailor our design. So again, thank you for all your comments and feedback tonight.
Great, thank you. And now we have Mike Kanalakis.
Thanks, Mary. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I have a number of concerns about this, and I agree with Mr. Ring, who talked a little bit earlier about this being the first opportunity for public comment. And I just recently learned about this. Even though I use the grade 2 or 3 times a day and go through that intersection, I'm well aware of the potential hazards that occur there. And one of the things that I think was missing from the presentation, which I would like to see, is the concept drawing of the roundabout. Now, I know all we have is a bird's eye view, like a site plan, but a true roundabout that's going to cover the geography that's portrayed in the site plan. We need to see a concept of it, because it's going to cut into the grade. It has to, if it's going to be at that intersection. And there's going to be a considerable drop to get down into it if it's a flat roundabout, or is it going to be an angled roundabout? Yeah, I think that makes a big difference. The other thing, is that a lot of emphasis on trucks, but bicycles and bicyclists that are going to be coming down that grade, and a lot of them do. We have to be mindful of them, and we have to be concerned about how they're going to enter that intersection and which way they're going to go. It's going to be tough. Roundabouts, from what I understand, and as the presenter said earlier, are generally traffic calming, not designed for small neighborhoods. What we're talking about here, from what I gather, is a traffic circle, which is larger. And you covered this earlier in your presentation, Jay. That intersection really needs a traffic circle, not a traffic roundabout, which slows traffic down like it would in a small community. What you want to do is keep the flow of traffic going. What I'm concerned about is the interaction that's going to happen between east and west traffic and traffic coming down the grade all at the same time, especially during rush hour. And I know there's going to be traffic studies and traffic engineering studies that are going to look into this. But during rush hour, when traffic gets really heavy, people are coming home from over the top. There's east and west traffic. How are we going to look at not backing up traffic, east and west traffic? So people coming home to the village that are traveling east, will that traffic be backed up? Because typically a traffic circle or a traffic roundabout has a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. So how is that going to be affected? So I'd be interested in your input.
Thanks for your questions, Mike. Any comments back, Jay or Randy or Daniel?
Yeah, so at this point, again, we have a concept, and your first kind of question about the full concept drawing, that is, what's its profile going to look like? What's the approach going to be? Is it going to be a flat roundabout? Is it going to end up, how is it going to end up actually fitting on the ground in that area? That's kind of our next phase. That's really what we need to be developing, because we're at that point in our design. We just really have so far kind of a 2D concept and an area that it would cover. And so now we would be moving into the more detailed design, which gets us into 3D and all those things that you were talking about, Mike. And I appreciate you bringing those up.
Well, if I could also add, are there roundabouts out there that are designed on a slope?
Absolutely. And if you missed towards the tail end of the presentation, I gave the two examples in Colfax and Truckee, where in fact they both have an approach grade that is similar to what we've got here at Laureles grade, that is around 8% or a little bit more.
I heard that, Jay, but that's approach. I'm talking about the actual circle.
Yeah. So maybe I'll let Daniel jump in here. He's our designer and has the experience designing those ones which have the grade on the approach and how we actually handle the roundabout itself, that grade.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. And I was also involved with the Holman Highway roundabout as well. So the gentleman, Public Works Director earlier, I was just out at that roundabout at the Roundabout Conference just about a month ago. One of my pride and joys. So very happy and excited to be working with all of you. Mike, you had some really good, astute questions. I'll let you know that we are working on that grading and we're fitting it into the natural environment fairly well. What we're ultimately going to be doing is actually taking the existing intersection at Carmel Valley and lifting that up to help with some of the grade corrections and minimizing our cut on the side slopes. But specifically to your question about the circle, it is also still going to be angled to the south or to the creek side of Carmel Valley Road with a constant down gradient, but less than 2%, because again, we're wanting to control those overturning truck potentials. So you have a lot of very questions. I'd love to dive into the details, but I think that those are scheduled for some future discussions and presentations to the group.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and hit some of the other questions since we have a limited time, but maybe you could hook up with Daniel afterwards and get some additional questions answered.
Sure.
But thank you for being with us. Next, I have my pal whose name is looking like it's just iPhone. And I'm sorry that I don't, but I see you. Please, I'm happy to have your comments now. That's you.
Me?
Yes.
Yes. Jay and Randy, thank you. My questions are, one, have you thought about reducing the grade and raising the roundabout, reducing, lessen the grade on Laureles coming down to Carmel Valley Road, and or having flashing lights and or an electronic signage, also to let the traffic know about the approach of the roundabout. Electronic signage works out very well. Flashing lights, the runaway truck thing really bothers me, but apparently they work very well. But I'm just wondering, How about the grade itself? Can you make it less than 8%?
Good question. Thank you. Jay, what do you think?
And we certainly can do that. That's part of what Daniel was saying. We are planning on, at least at this point, kind of raising the center island area of the roundabout, which will cause a slight lessening of the grade coming down Laureles grade into the intersection. So I think your ideas are on point for that. That's the way we're looking at the design. And the flashing lights and warning signs ahead of in all the directions as you approach the roundabout intersection would be a wise idea. And that's something we certainly would work with the county on to include as part of the design.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next we have Carolyn Hardy. Carolyn, you're going to have to unmute yourself by hitting your unmute button.
Thanks for the reminder, Mary. It's nice to see you again, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in the Zoom meeting. I live in Carmel by the Sea, but I travel this road twice a week. I come through that intersection twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. And I was thinking about a comment about Bernardus Lodge, and I have some information, personal information, that when Bernardus, I believe, was built, they, as part of the condition of approval to build, they had to relinquish some of that land to the county for the right-of-way. And I'm not sure if the county's ever really pulled the trigger on accepting that right-of-way. And I think it's something for you and your designers and your team to look into, because apparently when Bernardus built that corner sign of the stone wall, that's a curved crescent shaped, which would be on the northeast part of your roundabout, they actually, if they had built it on their own property rather than the right of way that they were donating to the county to get approval for building, that sign would be back in the trees. So in essence, they built that sign in the county right of way. So when you're thinking about the space that you need for that roundabout, the traffic traveling west, and a lot of traffic gets to Laureles grade and turns right. And I'm wondering if there's enough of your right of way where you could separate a lane where the right turning traffic to go north on Laureles grade wouldn't even have to get into the roundabout, but you could somehow separate the lanes the way the roundabout is at Holman Highway, where traffic trying to get from the highway to go north on 1 has a separate lane from the traffic heading south on 1 has a separate lane. So I'm just wondering if you have ever, if the county really has a handle on how much right of way they have there, because Bernardus has built their sign in the right of way. That was my understanding from someone who has some intimate knowledge about that. And one last comment, the people that are concerned about the construction and access of the road, I was amazed at how well the Holman Highway project went because I lived there. I was on TAMC board at the time to watch it happen and see how the logistics and the staging, and it worked beautifully. And I think having the team on this one, I think they will ensure that this one goes as smoothly as well, and that residents will continue to have access. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Carolyn. I agree with you completely. I go in and out of the Highway 1 Holman Highway roundabout several times a day. And also through the time that it was being built, one of the things I was so pleased with is that the communication was excellent. We always knew what was going to be closed so that you can figure out how you're going to go. It was just magnificent. And it took care of all of the big traffic problems that we had in that area. So I'm sold on roundabouts. Thank you. So do you want to comment, Jay or Randy, about the property issues regarding Bernardus?
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Adams. I'll start us off, and those are excellent questions, Ms. Hardy. With many of our road projects that we engage on, we oftentimes have the challenge of having objects in the right of way. In this instance, we do have right of way that was truly dedicated to us, the county. So you're absolutely spot on with that. It is staff's understanding we have accepted that right of way, but there are objects in the right of way here, since we are in the quote unquote beginning and middle phases of the design phase. this is that point in time where we'll start those discussions with the adjacent property owners about these objects. That's all things that we'll take care of in the due course of the design process as we go through the different phases and prior to construction. And then to your other points about the free right, Jay, if I could look to you and Daniel on that and all the in-depth analysis you all did in the course of this.
So I'll defer to Daniel, but at this point, I'm not sure that we identified a separate right turn lane. I'd have to go back and look at the traffic data that was used early on in the process. So Daniel, I'm not sure if you had a sense of that.
Sure, and this kind of rolls into Mike's question earlier about have we looked at the delay. In short, we certainly have. We definitely do need to look at the lens of the purpose of this project is really it's a safety project trying to mitigate one of the county's most dangerous intersections as far as number of incidents go. So when we look at roundabouts in general, we try to minimize the number of lanes we have because the more lanes you have, the more conflict points and the more opportunity you have for those instances and for people to cut corners and speed through intersections. So wherever possible, we try to push for single lane designs, and we have done at least a preliminary analysis. I'm sure we've completed it by now regarding the traffic study and the delays, making sure that the overall operations of the intersections aren't going to have more than, let's say a minute delay per approach, whatever the acceptable level of service, as they call it, go. And I do believe we have verified the single lane will operate great for Carmel Valley in particular, because that's the movement we're really changing from fleet flow to yield. And then regarding the multi-lanes, it showed that the traffic analysis is sufficient with the single lane, and the single lane is a safer option. And that's essentially the analysis we're running with for that determination. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Daniel. And now I'm going to, I think, Mr. and Mrs. Ring, I believe that that's probably a legacy hand. And we've had you speak before, so I'm going to come back to you at the end if you still have a question to ask while I hear from others who haven't spoken yet. Thank you. And now we have Carolyn and Richard Gray. There we go.
I have two comments to make. First, I wasn't aware of the meeting, and we live on the grade in Los Robles, as does the Ring. They were never aware of any of the meetings community meetings that were being presented. So it'd be nice to be able to include, and I know the people on the corner of the grade and Carmel Valley Road are not aware of the meeting either. And I'm hoping they were able to join this meeting tonight because I just contacted them maybe 15 minutes before the meeting. So I don't know if there's any way that you can find the addresses or phone numbers of people who live in this area where it's going to be impacted, and it will be all the people who live on the grade or off the grade that have to access that area. So that would be one thing I would request, that we have a better way of communicating. I think that I did see it on Facebook, and I think it may have been local Carmel or something like that I saw. So I'm just asking that there would be better communication about when the meetings are and how we can participate. The second comment that I had was the noise level that this is going to create, because we're so close to that area, and thinking about doing night work with all the lights and the noise. And I would object to night work only for that reason, because of the lighting and the noise that would happen while they were doing construction. The other comment that I have is that, is it possible not to have articulated trucks or Jake brakes or long 18-wheeler trucks go down the grade? They're just not allowed to go over the grade. I know that this occurs in other places where truck drivers know they can't go there because they're not allowed. Like they're not allowed to take Carmel Valley Road to King City because that's not a place where they can drive. So I know there are situations where there's roads that they cannot travel on. So I'm just wondering, do we know, or can we reduce the number of trucks going over the grade and not have Jake brakes?
Thanks for your comments, Carolyn, and we'll work harder on our social media. Going to your questions, I'll go back to Jay and then Daniel.
Thanks,
or Rich.
Supervisor Adams. I'll take the first part of that, and that's as it relates to the construction timelines. Obviously, we've not really gotten into the design phase. We have not actually set those stages up yet. But when I mentioned earlier that the potential for night work would probably be only very small, short durations where we needed to switch from one stage to the next, possibly one night at the most. The rest of the time, as we understand the way this roundabout lays out, we will be able to have the contractor working on that during the day for I would say 98%, 99% of the time. And then I'll push the truck issue over to Randy.
Thank you, Jay. So when it comes to prohibitions on roads, we need to do an independent traffic engineering study of that to serve as a basis to make a legislative change here at the local level. Here at Monterey County, when it comes to county roads, there's two components that come into play: legislation and enforcement. Legislatively, your Monterey County Board of Supervisors are able to pass legislation when staff is able to make a recommendation for a particular prohibition. For example, no parking overnight, or prohibiting trucks on a certain route, establishing speed limits, and so on. Our enforcement branch by default is generally the California Highway Patrol. So in order to make the legislation mean something, you need to have that enforcement, or in some cases, called the carrot and whip approach. Now, with that said, we would have to do our own independent analysis and study to see if it's justifiable to prohibit trucks to use Laureles grade at all. Something that we can look into, but that would take some time as well. And it would be difficult just offhand speaking today without having done the analysis to know how that study would lean. So just to let you know, it's a very involved process, but it's something that we can look into.
Thank you, Randy. Next, we have Cathy Pelosi.
Hello, everybody. For starters, my main point in this would be the most important part to me as an employee of the Sheriff's Department would be to make sure that emergency vehicles are not going to be impeded by this construction. So that would mean really good communication with the Sheriff's Department and to make sure that something is always in place so we have access to the valley. I do have some other concerns in some of the renderings that we saw about grades in other areas leading to a roundabout. I couldn't tell if it was an uphill grade or a downhill grade for the entrance. And I think that's going to make a huge difference. I'm kind of concerned with a downhill grade going into a roundabout, knowing some of the drivers we have in this county, that would be very enticing to some people to speed up their travels instead of slowing them down. Right now you have a stop sign and a 90-degree turn, which kind of forces some people to slow down. I am a little bit concerned about people whizzing down the grade and making a right onto Carmel Valley Road westbound, because it would be a little easier for them to pick up more speed. Working that area as a beat deputy for a very long time, there was very, very poor lighting at that intersection. And we actually had some people go through the stop sign and across the road into the bushes, trees. We had some fatalities and some pretty serious accidents. So that brings me to my next question is, what would the lighting be for the finished project and for during the construction? Where would equipment be staged during construction? And are we taking into account the quality of life issues for the residents of Carmel Valley for the construction of this and then the final project? This is supposed to improve our lives and make things safer, but if we're going to cause people to have less quality of life, they really need to have input into this. Living in a community where we didn't have input into something early on, it causes a lot of strife, and I would hate to see that happen out in Carmel Valley. So a better way to communicate and make sure they have as much input as possible would be really great.
Thank you, Cathy. Jay, any comments?
Sure, I believe all those to be extremely important issues that have been raised. Many of those are to be tackled during this next design phase. I think that's going to be an important element to help folks understand better as we begin to develop, as I mentioned before, kind of the 3D model of how this is going to work and how it's going to look. As far as the lighting and speed on the approach, again, I think some additional community outreach with we'll call it further design renderings and plans will, I think, help people understand much better once we get to that point. But I believe all those issues that have been raised will be, they'll be handled during design. And I think we'll end up with a very satisfactory project.
Thank you, Jay. Any comment on that, Randy, at all? Or Daniel? Good.
We'll certainly work harder on our communication and outreach.
Good. Thank you very much. And my office takes ownership of that as well. We will, I feel like Carol and I should call you and say, okay, give me all the telephone numbers or email addresses of the people on the street and I'll make sure we get them in the system. And maybe we'll do that. Okay, thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Barbara Greenway. You can unmute yourself. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. Yes, I have, Kathleen brought up the comment about the noise problem. We live directly behind Bernardus. Our two properties abut each other. And that she brought that up and I think that could be something we need to think about seriously, about quality of life. We get a lot of noise from the Bernardus construction that's been going on for at least a year now. But my question really was about asking for a detailed description of how traffic will be addressed during the construction period. Can we get some specifics as to will there be a limit to, will traffic be confined to a single lane at any point during the construction period? And how will that be monitored? That's all.
Thank you. Jay?
Well, really good question. And I guess I can't really tell you the answer to that just yet, because as I've mentioned, we're moving into that design phase, and that's really where we have to take into consideration all of those aspects. And again, what we're hearing tonight is really great feedback on. We're going to need to very carefully stage this work so that we're minimizing the noise, we're minimizing the we'll call it the one-way traffic control that is often found on two-lane highway construction projects. So those will be addressed as we get into our design phase.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Steph Ortiz, who is the last new person whose hand I see. And then after that, we will go back and hit the people who have had an opportunity to speak first beforehand, and then we'll be looking toward the end of the meeting. Ms. Ortiz?
Hello. So I am sure it's a little bit odd that I feel a little bit odd about being here in the meeting, but I'm very involved with, or I try to be very involved with the community and everything. And I mean, I love living in Carmel Valley, so this is something that I feel necessary towards putting my input from being of a younger generation. And I think, I don't know if this is necessarily a question, but more of a comment. I think something definitely that is going, like I'm sure Mr. Walter said that he, that it's going to be addressed later, the whole thing with the speed limit and everything. Something, I mean, people that I went to high school with and people my age aren't great drivers. And I'm sorry to I guess in a way, sort of tell on them. But it's something that concerns me because knowing how they drive, most of them at least, it's scary because I've had people drive past me on parts that they should not be driving past me on. And so it's just I guess the scariness of the roundabout and how it's going to be just one lane and people, or I don't know, they don't drive well, and that's scary. And having older parents, it is a concern. And I guess I think it's more of a suggestion as well towards the Monterey County Sheriff's Office, probably placing people there to just kind of, like keep an eye out on things for a little while, kind of like they did closer to the village for a while. I think that helped tremendously there. Because I mean, that was also a very big issue for people that were just walking their dogs or walking with their family. But yeah, sort of around that kind of stuff.
So I will turn it over to Jay, but I just want to tell you, Steph, thank you very much for your comments. It's important that we have all voices heard, and I'm really delighted to see someone who is a younger here with us today. So please don't ever hesitate to voice your opinion, and it's well respected and well regarded. So thank you. Jay, any comments back?
I think the idea that we need to plan for drivers of all ages, younger drivers, drivers kind of in that middle spectrum, and then older drivers as well. So, the information that we put out on the roadway, the signage, the direction, and everything has to be real clear. It has to be guidance that people can quickly understand and then navigate, say, this new roundabout. The one thing that, again, has been mentioned a number of times is the Holman Highway roundabout, which is just only a few miles away. To have the opportunity, if you can, to go drive through that, see what it's like, and try to go through it at a busy time. And you'll see that at least the way we understand the performance now is people are actually being a lot nicer there in letting people in with that roundabout to be able to circulate through it, which in this day and age is like very refreshing. So again, I think it's definitely a change, but I believe you've got a really good real world example of where this has been put in place now for a few years, and it's working very well.
Thank you so much for that remark, that comment. It's a good answer. We have a new hand.
Supervisor Adams, if I may. I'm sorry, it's Daniel over here.
Oh, sorry, there you are.
Hi.
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, so thank you again, Steph, for being involved. It's actually part of the reason I got into engineering, getting involved in my community, and kind of chose either politics or engineering, and I landed in engineering. So thanks for being here. I just wanted to hit the fact about the points that you mentioned about your peers not being safe or making smart choices out there on the road. What we do with these modern roundabouts is we actually make it physically impossible for them to drive 40, 50 miles an hour, like they would just on the straightaway Carmel Valley Road, or that you can do on a traffic signal, right? You can just ignore a red light and keep going. With a roundabout, we physically put in raised curbs where their vehicle would be driving up and over if they went any faster than our controlled speed. So I think that may also hit on one or two of the comments from Kathleen, Officer Palazzo. Thank you so much for being here, Sheriff.
Thank you again. And I see we have two new hands, and then I want to make sure I have time for Randy. So Susan Brody. And you'll need to unmute yourself. Thank you. After Susan, then we have Jeff.
Yes, I have one question, and that is, does the design include pedestrian crosswalks?
Great question. And where is our answer?
Yes, and the design will include pedestrian crosswalks on the approaches. And the main reason for that is because we have transit stops there, and we have folks that need to be able to navigate that and maybe cross the roadway. So bicycles and pedestrians will definitely be included in that design for safe access.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and Jeff? Unmute yourself.
Got it. Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't find the button there. Okay, being a retail business in the Valley, as well as on the civic board, curious about how long the overall time period is going to be.
You're talking about the construction time frame?
Right. Yeah, I agree with the project. I think is fabulous, but
Okay.
the overall time period on construction.
I'll defer to Daniel, but I know the two examples that we had from before took took a little over 6 months to construct.
It's not bad. And I'll start beginning in August with the game plan.
Well, it'll be August 2023 is when the design is complete, and then the county has to put out the project to bid, get a contractor on board and get started, which maybe it's another month or two or something like that. I can't really tell for that timeline at this point.
Okay, anything I can do to support it, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Everybody's moving around. Hands are going up, hands are going down. Mr. and Mrs. Ring. And then the Grays.
Did you get it? Hi.
Yes.
I just have two real quick questions. Has anybody compared the light situation at the end of the Carmel Valley or Laureles grade and Highway 68? They have a stop sign there that does back up traffic, but if it's a safety issue, it works fine. You can move through there. You don't need a big circle. Just plain old stop lights seem to work just fine. That's first question. Second one, who's paying for this?
Okay, two good questions. And we'll go back to Jay and then Randy.
Well, as far as the roundabout design, that's something that we did work through with county staff, and we've determined that roundabout would be a superior intersection control. And that's been something that we've been working on over the last, say, year and a half to come to that conclusion. And then as far as the cost, I'll defer back to Randy on that one.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Jay. And Daniel had his hand raised, and I'm not sure, Daniel, if you'd like to also opine.
Thank you, Randy. I really just wanted to hit on that point that Jay mentioned. We did do a intersection evaluation where we did look at signal as a possible alternative, but that really what we found through studies is the signals are not going to necessarily correct the type of collisions that we're seeing at this intersection, and major part of the reason the roundabout was selected. And to your point about the Monterey roundabout, if you noticed, everybody who knew the project beforehand and talking about the terrible traffic issues and congestion on the US 1, that was a signal, and the plan was to make it a bigger signal, and traffic was still backing up much more significantly. The installation of the roundabout not only solved the problem at that particular intersection and interchange, but up and down Highway 68 near the only hospital, really, community hospital on the peninsula. So the roundabout has proven in the real world and in the analysis world to be the operational benefit for this type of situation. And back to Randy for the overall cost and payment. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And as I had mentioned previously, Mr. and Mrs. Ring, the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee is an integral partner in this entire project, as well as all improvement projects along the Carmel Valley Road. A charter of the committee is to direct and guide the uses of a traffic impact fee that's collected when development occurs in the Carmel Valley Master Plan area. Geographically speaking, it's when new things get built in the entire Carmel Valley area. There's a fee that's assessed, and there's an account called the Carmel Valley Traffic Impact Fee, or CVTIF, which is meant for these types of improvements. And we, the staff, have received the guidance and direction and support of the Carmel Valley Road Advisory Committee for using those dollars for this current design phase and environmental phases. As we get into the construction, we are also trying to find other avenues, such as grants, such as the bipartisan infrastructure law from the federal government, and other means to help support that account and support this project.
Thank you, Randy. And I'm going to have one last comment, and that would be from Richard and Carolyn. Their hand is still up, and then I'll go back to Randy for some final words. And there we have it.
Well, thanks, Mary. I appreciate very much being able to hear all these very good questions. A couple of comments and a question. I travel on both this intersection at least twice a day, as well as on the Holman Highway on the way to the hospital at least twice a day, sometimes more than that. And I was a dubious customer about the roundabout for a variety of reasons, because we don't do this in America, but they do it all over Europe. And I am now a big fan of it because it's gone from a stoplight with a big backup and car stacking up half a mile in every direction you could imagine, and it works quite well. The comment I have is that I don't remember seeing any trucks larger than a box truck, delivering furniture or whatever to Pebble Beach. And I just don't see an 18-wheeler ever making it through there. And I don't know how much rigor we need to go into to do an analysis to say that, a big rig just isn't, unless this is going to be a much larger floor plan than what we're seeing here on Holman Highway. The transition from where it is now to the way we're going to do it in the future, I think, has been emphasized, but I can't emphasize that enough. In the past, the Holman Highway job was basically a stoplight, so everyone was doing 0 miles an hour for much of the transition through there. And here we have 45, 50, 60 mile an hour traffic that will have to somehow realize that life is different when this all happens. And I think that'll probably be good to slow things down. The question is the acreage involved here. This, I presume, is going to be much bigger than the Holman Highway footprint. I guess, okay, so then maybe you've already talked about it, but it would seem to me like you're going to need a pretty good sized footprint to make this work.
Thank you, Richard. Any response to that, Jay?
Yeah, actually, what we've looked at and determined to be our preferred location for that central island, it really doesn't involve any additional right-of-way. It involves some temporary construction easements that would be needed as we get close to the edge of the county right-of-way and have the need to, for the construction project, be able to do work and encroach in an area. But once that's done, then that property is back to the hands of the owner, the adjacent owners. So we're in, we actually are, it's a pretty tight fit, but based on the geometrics, we believe that this will be the roundabout type that's needed here, and it will accommodate those larger vehicles as needed.
Yeah, and if I may jump in real quickly, Jay, just to your notes about the truck accommodations in Monterey and kind of the overall size. We're actually anticipating the roundabout at this location, Laureles Grade, Carmel Valley Road, to be slightly smaller than that at the Holman Highway roundabout, because the Holman Highway roundabout actually has multi-lanes for a couple of the approaches. And that intersection does accept and received very large vehicles throughout the year. Some of the big events we had to plan for as a part of that design was the Concours de Elegance, where they, truck in these big double trailers full of cars stacked too tall with, 2 trailers long. And we designed for that and accommodated it in the Holman Highway and are certainly doing it here. So we're taking care of you and the community for any of those movements that may or may not be restricted in the future. Either way, we'll make sure they'll be able to get through.
Thank you. I see we have Mike with a quick question, and then I want to give the address that you can contact us to make sure that you get information so that you'll be informed of the next meeting. Mike?
Hey, thanks, Mary. I appreciate it. Yeah, for you, Mary, perhaps a good way to notify residents around the community of the affected area might be to use the county emergency notification system for targeted areas, strictly that there's going to be a meeting. This is a pretty high profile project that's going to be affecting a lot of lives and a lot of people out there. So it might just be, the next time there's a meeting, just, those phone calls that come in, those automated phone calls, it could be helpful.
Great, thank you for that.
And I just wanted to end by saying, I know a lot of work has gone into this project, and since this is the first time that I've heard about it, I just, I don't want to be a pessimist, but at the same time, I have to say that I'm somewhat disappointed that, finding out so late about it, and I know I'm not the only one, and that, it just seems unfortunate that, county staff is making a decision that's affecting the entire community out there in Carmel Valley. And I'm hopeful that with the proper public input, you, the board, will make the right call when the time comes. I'm seeing this as a done deal. I don't know that there's going to be any change. So from here on out, I guess it's just a matter of input and how this thing is going to flow. But thank you for the opportunity.
Comments. Absolutely. And what I would suggest to everyone who's on the phone, please do contact my office so that we can ensure that we have your information and we can make sure that that you're able to be contacted about the upcoming meetings. And that address is district 5 at co.monterey.ca.us. Thank you for that. And Randy, would you want to make any final comments?
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Adams. We appreciate everyone's time and the thought and feedback that you provided us with this evening. We're going to take this information back and meet with our design consultant and also formulate responses as well as how it incorporates into the design. Also, as a note, we're happy to answer any questions you might have, including the previous studies that were performed by TAMC, as well as through Kimley Horn doing the Carmel Valley Road Corridor study, which were basis documents that led to the foundation for this design. So we're happy to share that with you if you'd like to reach out to us. There's going to be many more community meetings from this point forward as well. So it's not stopping here. We're going to continue meeting with you, and we're going to use those avenues that you suggested, Mr. Kanalakis, and as well as other means that we have to continue that feedback and have you come along with us along the way, however the path may go for this project. And we appreciate your graciousness, Supervisor Adams, in taking the additional questions for us. So if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out directly to the email address Supervisor Adams had relayed, or to us at Public Works, and we'll relay that to our design consultant and get back to you. This is truly a project that involves an entire village, and we all need to be on the same page as we move forward on this project.
Thank you for your words, Randy. Thank all of you for joining us. I look forward to seeing some of you at the Carmel Valley Art and Wine Association event this weekend. And again, thank you so much. Please do contact us so that you can get on the list of folks that we can reach out to. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. And again, thanks so much for your input, and it'll definitely be listened to. Thanks, and bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.